Smart cities are beginning to pop up all over the planet. The definition of a smart city can vary, but basically it's any city that is trying to create better services, operate more efficiently, and increase public safety by using new technology and collecting data from residents. Cities are working on things like public Wi-Fi, better traffic management, driverless city buses, and kiosks that connect people with city events, nearby restaurants, and emergency services. And most of these tools require information about the people using them. If that sounds complicated and full of a bunch of new information most of us will never understand, that's because it kinda is. So to clear things up, I sat down with Jared Holton. He's the guy behind Smart Cities New York, an annual gathering of policymakers, tech innovators, and normal folks like you and me that are leading the charge to, well, make cities easier, safer, and more fun to live in. You said you created the idea of this conference.
Yes.
What got you so interested in the concept of smart cities?
So two big things. One is if you're looking at today and walking forward into the future, it's hard to imagine that you can put 2.5 billion more people in cities and have cities like we have today work. So there's got to be something changes. And technology is one of those big changers, but people are the other change. So behavior changes, we learn to live differently, but we also use technology to make our life better. We've done that for the last 3 or 4 centuries, especially. Cars arrive, computers arrive, life changes. Second is, I've always had a love of technology. I've had assignments where my job was technology and innovation, whether it was in the military, whether it was running a university. So about in 2005, I said, let's make urban the focus of New York University, which it has become. And secondly, I said, now let's make the world focus on cities, and that's what I'm trying to do.
My understanding of it is that it is to make people's lives easier in cities, to make people's lives safer in cities, and to make the cities run more efficiently. Is that kind of
Yes, I think that's a great capitalization. Sometimes people just think it means the government runs more efficiently. That's very helpful. But the bigger opportunities are the quality of life improvements, the elimination of the wasted time.
People love technology. We're constantly on our phones. All of us, we're walking on, emailing and texting on our phones, so we're constantly involved in it. Have you found when you're talking to cities and mayors and governors, people that are will actually have to make this stuff work, do they seem like they're ready for it? Do cities feel like they want this?
So I think every mayor in America, and it's actually around the world in my travels, China, India, Europe, mayors want to do this. Do they know what to do? That's sometimes the question. Some do. Take Singapore, headed right down this road. Take Copenhagen, Amsterdam, Stockholm, a lot of European cities, right down this road. American cities, still getting the picture. So the desire's there, the solutions just beginning to show up. But they're showing up more often now. We're beginning to see people understand how to access potholes and discover a pothole before it turns into a major pothole. Sensors are doing that. So there's a change going on, but it's still happening.
Do you think they're apprehensive, or do you think it's just a matter of helping them to understand that that for you guys believe something needs to change and trying to convince mayors of that?
Well, if you look at Europe, the European Union put a lot of money up about 10 years ago to make their cities better. And that had a profound impact. And those are old cities which took on new technology. It's quite delightful. If you think about America, we never had that major initiative that said we will truly change our cities. So first, we didn't have a national initiative. Secondly, we have fairly well-run cities, so it's not like they're broken. So unlike, let's say, in China, where they knew they had to build new cities or fix old cities, we were more in a kind of, well, it's okay. So I think we're trying to break through that now and say, well, we may be okay, but we could be a lot better, a whole lot better. Take affordable housing. We could rework construction. We could deliver more value in housing. People, young people would have a place to live that could be much more exciting at a price they could afford.
And cheaper.
And cheaper.
Yeah.
And cheaper.
Yeah.
And that's beginning to seep into America's consciousness.
And what are some of the coolest things that you're seeing happening around the world when it comes to smart cities? I've been doing feverish research in preparation for this, and I've seen ideas where like kiosks that are pretty simple, and it says this is what is in our city, to underground trash collection. Like it runs the gamut.
Yes, there are lots of great technology solutions. In fact, there's thousands of them, and it's hard to catalog them, and I think over time we'll see them kind of wrap themselves into clusters, and they'll be easier for a city to adopt.
Because right now the sky's the limit, right?
That's right, lots of things.
Yeah.
But you could go in Central Park now and walk down the park, and the trees have got a marker on them. If you put your cell phone against the marker, it tells you what the tree is, the history of the tree. Okay, simple little thing, makes the walk a little nicer. You've got, like you say, underground trash storage in Barcelona where they're moving it hydraulically so there's no trash on the streets. Delightful solution for quality of life. Then you've got, like in this city, we've got a technique where we put a sensor in every manhole to detect that there's stray voltage or gas leaking out, so we get fewer exploding manholes, fewer electrocutions.
Nice.
It's a nice little thing. So no one would see it, and yet it changes the quality of life. We're getting our buses, so when they come down the street, they flash a signal through the Wi-Fi to the street light, turns the light green, they keep moving. So if you ride a bus, you now get the kind of speed you ought to get instead of being trapped in congestion. All those are sort of exciting things.
In Singapore, for example, where they want to be a smart nation, they say, in the next few years, they even are doing every car is going to have a sensor in it so that they can give tickets. They can they won't have to send police out to stop traffic and all these kinds of things. There's also the bullet trackers where ShotSpotter, right?
ShotSpotter is really interesting because what it does is it allows you to begin to understand who are the causes of violence. And in Oakland, based on ShotSpotter, they discovered it was only 20 to 40 people out of the whole city of 1 million people. So instead of thinking everybody's a problem, they're able to say, no, here's where our problem is. Let's be sure that we've kind of figured out how to get them either to behave, or if they're truly criminals, to arrest them and take them off the streets. That's a big change from just violence is pervading our city.
When we come back, Jerry and I spoke about your privacy and your data as cities try to connect us more than ever before. When you think of smart cities, you probably start thinking of big cities, New York, Seattle, Los Angeles. But there are much smaller cities around the United States doing some of the exact same work. Do you see this being something that cities in the Midwest are going to get on board?
Well, we see Columbus, Ohio won the Transportation Award for Smart City. So they now got $50 million. The private sector put in another $350 million. So Columbus, Ohio is driving right up.
Yeah, and you had smart cities in Kansas?
Kansas has been real good. Kansas City's strong. But what I'm beginning to see is this. I'm working with a set of people running for governors and mayors about how to give small cities some of this edge, to give them a creativity, innovation benefit. So I think we not only have the big cities, which have enough staff, they can create an innovation team. How do we get the smaller cities to be able to pull it off the shelf and plug it into their cities?
We're walking around, people seem really excited because this is kind of new to a lot of people. Do you think you'll be able to sustain that kind of excitement as smart cities become maybe the norm?
Well, I think we're finding mayors more and more getting interested. For instance, the head of the Conference of Mayors, so all of the cities of America will be here tomorrow, Steve Benjamin. And Steve will carry this message back across all those cities. So the answer is, I think it's on its way, but you got to engage people or it'll just turn into a techno solution without people getting any benefit. And two, you need to have examples, real things. Ideas are nice, real things are better.
Now let's talk a little bit about some of the concerns some people have about smart cities, because we think about data. We're constantly telling the cloud, the world, where we're going, the kind of person we are. When it comes to protecting people's data, we've seen that tech companies sometimes have a difficulty doing that. We look at Facebook, for example, right? And the Cambridge Analytica scandal that they're going through right now. And this is something that you can't opt out of, right? Like, you can opt out of Facebook, you cannot go on Facebook. But if you live in a city and this data is being collected off of your phone and your phone is pinging in, you can kind of make a really good picture of who a person is and how they interact with the world.
Well, I think that we clearly think smart cities ought to be powered by people. So having people's lives be good is the essential ingredient. So that includes privacy, it includes those security, and there's a bit of a trading back and forth. If I create a really secure city where you're always safe, would you give up a little bit of privacy? You might. On the other hand, if I'm still a rampant city full of crime and I'm taking your data and using it, that's not a bargain that people want to have. Secondly, we're seeing in Europe the beginning of a clear definition of consumers' rights related to data and privacy. You'll see almost by the fact that we're a global community means those standards are going to be washing back into America. So you'll see, let's call it a second generation of how we protect privacy, still use data. Some of it can be done by atomizing the data, taking the individual out of it and using the composite of the data. So we may know, here's the traffic flows or here's the number of people buying in this part of town, but we aren't necessarily tracking you individually, the buyer. I think that's all evolving. It's important people pay attention, and that's one reason why we said powered by people.
How do you get people comfortable with that, right? That you talk about that trade-off, but let's say you do make all of the data anonymous. How do you talk to people and let them know that?
So a town hall is a chance for citizens, companies, governments to get together in an informal environment and talk about these trade-offs. So one is to just keep the conversation going. Two is to begin to create a more cogent set of consumer and citizen rights related to privacy, and have that turn into a standard that is let's call it a base standard that almost every city uses. We've seen that happen in other places. We have a standard on what's considered a green building. We could have a standard on what's considered a proper privacy. I think the other thing we have is I think the private sector will begin to develop is a set of apps that let you rate the privacy standards of all the apps you've teamed up with. So let's create a new app that basically helps you decide, is this privacy standard meet the things that a citizen ought to care about? Mm-hmm. Finally, I think it's important to keep talking about the benefits that come from technology, solve the problems, and there are problems at times, but there have been problems every time we introduce a new technology. It goes through an evolution. Cars arrive on the scene, the traffic light doesn't show up on day one. Traffic lights finally show up to say at intersections we need something like this. That's the evolution of a technology. We'll see it happen with these technologies.
And when you talked about standards and we talk about what makes a green building, those come from government interaction, right? So is there work being done? Because my sense from, I'm in DC, my sense from DC is that they're not really paying attention that much to smart cities. Yeah. They're paying attention to like Facebook and Twitter. They're just and barely understanding that as a whole. So what is being done and how much interaction are you guys having with government entities on the national level to say, you should get in on this and help us to create some kind of standards and create some kind of possibly oversight, I guess?
Well, the two things. I think we're seeing the emerging power of cities. Cities are beginning to realize they may need to take care of it themselves. That the national government has other agendas, especially in America where we have 50 states and then, let's say, 300 big cities and lots more cities. This is a very complex, energetic engine. And too much top-down regulation begins to stifle innovation down lower. So I don't entirely mind the federal government not paying attention.
I bet.
We're in a period of innovation and evolution, so let there be experiments in city after city and state after state that are somewhat different, and let all that bubble up to perhaps the best set of standards. Secondly, green buildings is primarily not a government proposition. That was the private sector and nonprofits stepping up to say, we'll create something that allows buildings to move in the right direction. So I'd be in favor of nonprofits, events like this, where out of this event comes a movement to say we need a privacy standard, we need a cybersecurity standard, we need a benefit to citizens standard that is an ethic that all cities use, but it comes out of the people and the organizations, not from 100 people at the top saying this is how it ought to be.
And who may not fully understand it, right? to be honest,
that's right.
From the top down.
It's hard at the top
Yeah.
to understand everything, and
Yeah.
it's hard to be flexible enough. And we've seen some regulations work well, and other regulations just stifle behavior. So we have to be careful how we regulate.
In our last segment, Jerry and I talked about sustainability, but also how to make sure that all these technological advancements continue to be equitable for the people that are already living in the cities. Let's talk a little bit about sustainability and making sure, because we talked a little bit about the green buildings. As people create this technology, are they making sure, is the goal to make sure that we're not speeding up climate change, or they're not, the effects on the planet are minimal? And are there ways that smart cities can even help stem the bleeding of some of the things that cities are doing that have already kind of like, some scientists say, sped climate change along?
Well, if you look at the last 100 years, we had this rise of the consumption of electricity, which essentially then created a lot of power plants and essentially a good bit of what's going on, and the rise of transportation at a mass level. What we're seeing as we move forward is things like 5G. 5G uses less power, smaller units, therefore you can do a lot of things with little batteries that you essentially need almost no power. So you'll see, I think, power come down. The second thing is you make systems more efficient. So let's take congestion. Idle cars sitting on highways are a big cause of pollution. If the cars move right along, and if you use a lot of public transportation because it's really designed well, you've cut way down on the amount of effluent you're putting into the air. Take delivery vehicles. There's ways to move products into cities. We'll see the rise of drones for some of this that cut down again on the amount of power being consumed to move goods. Finally, a lot of times we're not always driving to work. We're working at home 1 day a week or 2 days a week. We're not going to as many conferences around the world.
Working at WeWorks.
That's right.
Walking.
That's right. Much closer. We're riding bicycles because the bicycles have a GPS on them that lets me find the nearest bicycle. It's smart and also green.
Yeah, that's something that we just got in DC, actually. The last topic I want to talk to you about, maybe the most important, is as this technological advancement happens, how important and what is your team's emphasis on making sure the disruption of the city as is how do you lessen that? How do you make it so that the people who already live in a city aren't being uprooted because they can't afford to live in this very technological savvy city now?
Well, I think first, I don't think technology by definition means expensive. For one thing, the ability to put a camera in your home is down to like $10 a month. So you can have a safe home where you can watch your pet while you're at work. Not very expensive. So.
I have a friend that had just yesterday showed me that she can watch her dog and throw it a treat from her phone.
All right.
Yes.
All right. So see, she's probably spending maybe $10 a month for that.
I think that's right.
So I think there's a lot of things that could be less expensive. Certainly, if you begin to work on public transportation that follows the last mile, so maybe you take the subway to the end of the line and then you take Lyft or Uber or a taxi the last half mile home, that now lets you use public transportation instead of driving a car to work. Study's been done that said if we were 100% shared automobile economy, that's where everyone used essentially someone else's vehicle, every family in America would have $5,600 more a year to spend on something else. Educate their kids, take care of their grandparents, go on vacation, build a different home. That's a lot of money returned to people to use for something other than parking their car. What's the statistics? 5% of the time are you using the value of your car. 95% sits idle. That's an enormous waste of money. That is a tax, especially on the poor. And if the middle class began to actually depend on public transportation, the poor who absolutely need it would get a lot better public transportation. As they say, if the rich rode public transportation, you can be sure subways in New York would not be what they're like today.
No, not as many protests.
That's right.
And so what are the things that you think that cities should be doing to because the disruption is going to happen, right? But it's how do you lessen that disruption? And especially you talked about poor communities, how for those poor communities and for those lower middle class families, how do you lessen that disruption for them?
First, engage them in the transformation. So we're doing that in New York City. So in Brownsville, which is a very poor community, the young kids are using virtual reality already to redesign the streetscape where all the retail's closed. They're putting stores in by virtual reality. So this is what this could be like at our place. So one is engage. Two is educate. So train a set of young people, educate a set of young people who know how to use technology and change to make a city better. That's what we're doing with what I created at NYU, the whole way I redesigned the engineering school. So young people grow up saying, I'm going to make a difference not on how, let's pick something, how the computer at the top of IBM works. I'm going to make a difference on how the sensor in my neighborhood makes children going to school safer. So that'd be two. Three would be create an ethic amongst the larger corporations, which sometimes do tend to come in and just say, oh, here's the way we ought to do it.
Right.
That says you ought to be powered by people. Engage the people in your process. Don't jump in and just say this ought to work. Arrive, talk, listen, like the people, help them build a better place.
Anything else that people who don't understand smart cities, because a lot of this is very new for a lot of our viewers, right? Is there anything else you want to let people know about smart cities? Because it seems like they're coming.
I think they're coming because we need them. It's almost impossible to imagine 2050 when most of your viewers are going to be at the prime of their life. If we leave cities the way they are now, you're going to have unhappy citizens around the world. If we improve our cities, you're going to have vital, innovative people saying this is a great place to live. So the final thing would be this. Let's have a lot of examples. Nothing beats proof, a pilot, a story that works. So what you're doing, feature the stories of success around the world. Pick them up and broadcast them and move them across the internet so that people in Peoria and people in Las Vegas say, that's what I want in my city, Mr. Mayor. Why don't I have that? Because the solutions are out there. Now we need to have people say, I see it, I believe it, and this is what I want in my city. So a lot of examples, thousands of examples would be very good.